Oh. You might want to just make sure to mute the presenter until yours again.
Yeah, mute everybody. Well, except for this computer. So they just mute everybody. Yeah, mute everybody except the presenter.
Good evening, everyone. We are just waiting for the in-person meeting to begin. So thank you for your patience while we wait for that. If you have any questions along the way, you can type them into the chat box or email me. And you should have all received an email with my email address. If you prefer to email me, it's marianna@plancom.org. Or like I said, you can enter your questions and comments into the chat.
Testing 1 2 testing. Testing 1 2 testing. Testing. Does this sound better or worse?
That sounds good. That sounds loud and clear.
Okay. How about this? Does this sound better or worse?
There's some echo to that, so it actually sounds better without the mic to your face.
Okay. Yes.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started here in a minute. Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Jared Schneider with Kimley Horn. We're going to go ahead and get started. I see some familiar faces. We're working with the Planning Commission and the Hillsborough County staff on this project. And see some familiar faces. Thanks for coming. Seems so far away. Almost move closer. What we're going to do tonight is we've got kind of a quick presentation, and then we're going to go over kind of open forum where we're going to have some questions and answers. This is a smaller group. What we have on that other side of the room here are just stationaries to give you a little bit more information on what we've been working on and some of the policy changes that we're thinking about. Given that this is a smaller group, we'll probably walk through it together and kind of explain what we're doing. So let's get into it. All right, so again, I kind of went over this. We have basically 4 stations over there. We're going to talk about a summary of points of what we've been working on over the last few months. And then we're going to show you a little bit of what's on the books today from the existing policies in the area and what we're proposing right now. And we're still working through that. And then we've got kind of a community benefits discussion, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we mean by that. And then looking at the development character and pattern, we're going to get into that as well. Looks like there's a 1 second lag here. There we go. All right. Yeah. It might be hard for some of y'all to see this. So basically what we're looking at, what we're talking about today, and what we've been talking about is this pink area. That's what's under kind of a residential rezoning moratorium. So that's what we've been looking at, this policy regulations, what happens in that area. There's also the area in the yellow, not under moratorium, but the regulations we're looking at are in that area as well. So again, this map's just kind of honing in on the area that we're talking about today. And then you'll see a couple other lines that the kind of hashing, the blue hashing over here. That's the urban service boundary. So everything we're looking at is outside of the service boundary. And then there's this kind of purple, some will say pink, whichever way you look at it, that's a dashing in there. That's the BOM community plan area. So several years ago, and Buddy, you're probably part of that, there was a plan put together for that area. So we've definitely been trying to look at that and make sure we integrate it. So I talked a little bit about this already, what we're doing. And so we're looking at that area, we're looking at the policies, what's called the comprehensive plan for residential plan 2. And that's kind of the higher level, broader, what could be developed in the area. And then we look at the land development code, those are really more detailed, specific regulations. Someone's trying to develop, it gets really into the details. So those are the two things we're looking at. So I like the balance being what we're trying to do here is come up with a workable solution. And there's a number of different things that we're talking about. We've had a number of different discussions with public stakeholders in the area, from people that own property to land use attorneys, the community, the BOM Civic Association, and there's a balance. And so population growth, we talk about that a lot in the area. The need for better infrastructure, that keeps coming up over and over again. We've talked a lot about that. So balancing those two items. And then the rural character of the area versus what's been built, or what you're seeing sometimes is what's called clustered development. Clustering development and having open space and a development. And then we've talked a little bit about the desire for larger lots versus a minimum open space percentage. A lot of what we've been talking about is folks like the idea of larger lots versus open space that's not usable. And then again, I'll get into the desire for community benefits. We're looking at that. So developers, if they were to develop, would have to provide community benefits. And there's concern over that, the feasibility of some of those. And also we'll get into this in more detail too. We're focused on larger tracts of land, 160 acres or over. And you can aggregate property up to 160 acres in a SPOM area. And there's a couple little fine nuances, and that's what the boards are for. And also kind of the balance or the workable solution for those that own smaller properties that want to develop. What does that look like? A lot on this slide, but this is what we've really been I think this does a good job of hitting kind of the main topics of what we've really been looking at. So what we're not really talking about at this point is kind of the environmental sensitive land credit. That's something that's come up. If there's questions on that, we have staff here tonight that can talk about that. We're not, again, I kind of just hit on this. We're not talking about tracts of lands that are smaller than 50 acres in that north area. It was that kind of that yellow area I was showing. And acreage that's under 160 acres in that BOM village, that pink area I was showing on the map. Again, we have maps over here too. You can aggregate above those acreages, but again, we're not talking about smaller acreage. And then the broader infrastructure concerns outside of the RP2 area, not really talking about. So this is just a recap of what we've been doing since April. We had April 1st, 2021, and then we've had a series of topical meetings really focused in. So we had several in April and May on neighborhood design. What are we talking about? What do new neighborhoods look like? And then we had a general discussion in 22nd and the policy changes on June 8th. Again, what I'd like to talk about here is we had a broad spectrum, spent a lot of time with members of the community, Palm Civic Association, landowners, attorneys, and we're trying to come up with a workable solution. There's not a perfect one out there with different viewpoints, but that's where we're trying to strike that balance. So now we're going to transition a little bit. I'm going to tell you about everything you're going to see now. That's where we have it on the boards. And we gave you a little bit of a handout. We're not going to let you leave until you fill it out. Really, this is where we need your help tonight. And there's a lot of information here, but we wanted to give you kind of all those meetings that I just talked about is summarized here. So the benefit, you didn't have to go through hours of meetings. It's all summarized. So the concerns, again, I want to hear if we're missing something tonight too, or you feel like we misrepresented something, and that's in your handout too. So concerns, talking about the rural character, the compatibility, need for better infrastructure. That's come up time and time again, right? And then the consistency and predictability of what future development looks like. Those are some major concerns that we've heard. But there's also, as we start to talk about and work with these different groups and viewpoints, there's been several points of agreement. And what we heard is maintaining that rural character, varying home types, it's that monotonous 40-foot lot width that folks really don't like. Just kind of steering clear of that. There's a preference for larger lots. So we're getting into kind of the home types, the building types. And then a lot of what we talked about is how do you effectively screen it if you are going to develop. And also commercial has come up. And one thing I thought was interesting, everyone agreed on is coming up with kind of a dark sky community. And that's just for lighting aspects. It's not, you're lighting up everything at night. So on the right-hand side where it says policy focus, that box, it kind of reiterating everything I just talked about, but that's been our focus because of everything we've heard. It's really the development pattern, the lot types, and the mix. And we're trying to figure out a way, if you are to develop, what does the outside of the development look like? You screen it. And then that gets again into kind of the different lot type discussion, open space and community benefits, and then the compatibility of the area. So again, I know there's a lot here, but the station one, we've got a whole board on that. We're gonna have staff ready to talk about that and go into that further. I'm giving you the real quick Cliff Notes version. All right, so now we're going to move into what I'm calling station two. And this gets into the meat, of what we're talking about. So there's policies again today. If one wants to develop and they want to develop 2 units per acre, there's things that they have to do. And it's called the planned villages. Back in the day, when this was created, it was looking at creating a village. So in order to do that, you had to have a 250-foot buffer required around 70% of the site. The more and more we talked to the community about that and some of those focus meetings, it was more about how do we screen the development. So that's what you almost see like a direct correlation on that right-hand side where we're talking about buffers and landscaping. So trying to screen what the outside looks like. Open space came up. That was something early on we were looking at having kind of a set percentage of any development has to have open space. More and more as we talked about it, folks have talked about they don't want unusable open space. So we've kind of come up with a smaller percentage where a developer would have to do internal open space. Clustering, that's something that a lot of people mention, and that's where you take a development and you, let's say, you could do on 10 acres, 20 units, you cluster them all in one part of the property. That hasn't been something that folks have really liked. So we've been addressing that, and we really don't have a clustering requirement at this point. So that's kind of the gist on the perimeter buffering and screening. And now again, this is all over here on the boards. We started to get into what does that lot mix look like and trying to get that variation. So today there's no policies that say you have to do any types of varying lot types. Right now in the policies, we're recommending up to 3 lot types, and that gets into different sizes. What the perimeter could look like, where you could have either larger lots on the perimeter or you're doing screening is where we're at right now. The smaller lots, the 40-footers that you see out there that a lot of people have reacted to that just don't fit that character, right? The rural character. we're not quite, we're at 50 feet. So we've had a discussion on that. So it's been increased. So those 50, 60 foot, those narrower lots still, those have to be internal to the site. So again, we're trying to address what the look and the feel of the outside looks like. Now we're kind of moving into community benefits. And what we're saying here is if someone wants to develop up to those 2 units per acre, they have to provide some benefits the community is looking for. There's infrastructure concerns, community services. That's not something, this is a new concept. And we basically have a tiering system. You have to provide a certain number based on the size of your development. And this is really what we want to hear from y'all tonight. We'll get into, I'm not going to go over all of them. We'll do a quick summary here, but this is where we want to hear what's most important to the community. Because what we're looking at and proposing here is if someone's to come in and develop, there's a list of 14 benefits, and we have a kind of a most important, and we're calling it the tier 1. So you have to provide, basically one of these 5 different categories: infrastructure improvements, something that deals with lot types or screening, land dedication, and we have kind of commercial and then environmental. So there's a lot here, but we're really trying to come up with a list that is important to you all. So we'll go through that exercise. All right, so this is kind of going to be in station 4, which is back that way, and we'll have labels for this. And again, we'll have staff. I think with the smaller group tonight, we might just be able to kind of take this as a walking show and kind of go this with everybody at the same time. We heard this at the county commission board meeting last week. The larger lots. And this is something we've been talking about for a while now. Are those half-acre lots, or the desire for larger lots? And this is where we want to hear from y'all. We've got smaller lots identified, and then what's that right mixture? So again, we've got kind of an exercise we'll go through, and what we want to hear about is some of these concepts we're talking about, like screening, buffering, open space. There's questions, and you'll see, and Nicole's sitting right here. She did a good job on the questions, but we want to make sure we want to hear from y'all and going through those. All right. So we're kind of showing you a simplified example right now, and what this gets into is taking all those 3 lot types. What we're looking at, we almost call this we're going to do a cookie, like a brownie. This is just a typical site plan. You had 200 acres. What folks don't always realize is, so if you're going to develop that out, you'd have to do 15% of your development would be made up of streets, 10% by stormwater. So a quarter of that 200 acres would just be infrastructure, would be taken up by infrastructure. And what we're showing is kind of what the proposed code shows. So 2.5%, we're saying you have to have that internal open space. That could be active parks. We talked a little bit about having some active recreation in a development. And then the neighborhood center. And then what's left is just over 50% of it's left for developing lots. So keep that slide in mind before. I'm going to scooch back here. No, so there's 40% is not required today. That was in the proposed code previously early in the year. What we're saying now is you have to do the buffers, which includes open space. And then what we're only dictating for a percentage is what's internal to the site. So that 2.5% is really just internal. And by remember, we're kind of talking about perimeter buffering, and that could take up, and I didn't quite go over that yet, but that could take over anywhere from 20 to 30, almost 40% in some cases of open space. Yeah. Yeah, so the open space internal is just 2.5 the way we have it proposed right now. Next down. There's no requirement today on internal open space being 40%. So there's no requirements for, that was something we were proposing, a total of 40% open space for a whole site. But yeah, that's not something that's on the books today. That makes sense? We can talk more about it, but yeah, that wasn't. Okay, so what we heard from the board last week, and this came out of some of the recommendations that we've been coming up with is a time of rezoning, looking at the compatibility. I think that's been something that's talked a lot about. As development comes in, it's not compatible, it doesn't fit the area. So there's several policies that staff's looking at right now. As a site plan's approved, you have to look at including a checklist that includes some of that buffering and screening, and buddy, that could get into some of the open space too and the perimeter lots. And then the county's also looking at, it's been spending a lot of time looking at policies and alternative metrics for timing. That's been the big deal of having the infrastructure in place in time before you can develop. So there's policies that staff's been working hard on that one. So we can talk more about that in detail. Thunder came right when I changed slides. So kind of to talk a little bit about the schedule, where we're headed. We've got another public hearing with the Planning Commission, July 19th. We'll be giving them where we're at with that. August 5th, we've got a transmittal to the BOCC and really looking at adoption in the October timeframe. The moratorium today, as we're just kind of showing you that pink area, currently it's ending December 31st, 2021. So I went over a lot of material. Again, I want this to be pretty interactive. What we want to do is spend about the next 15, 20 minutes having questions. And then again, we've got some more detail of the station areas. You've got a handout. Everybody's got a handout. And we can kind of go through this exercise together. But before we break, let's open it up for questions and answers. Yes, ma'am. And I think we're going to have you come up just so everybody out there's folks online can pick up. Oh, yeah, do that.
And the question is, on the bullet point that says at the time of rezoning, you'll see got the compatibility that was.
Yeah, so and maybe staff's got more on this as well. So that's where notices would go out for a project. It would let you know this project's coming. There would be certain criteria, like we were talking about the screening and the buffering. There would be a checklist of items that we kind of looked at, like what's next to that site plan, and then those notices would go out for the community to be able to come in and provide input. Sure. Yeah, sorry, we're just trying to make sure everybody online.
Why don't we also and then river. Oh, why not?
And the policy that's something in the policy too.
Somebody else said that too. After they
I'm going to try. I couldn't quite hear. I'm going to try to paraphrase, and I know others online can hear from what it's looking like. So I think you were talking about the policies 33.81, 33.814, do those policies include roads? Is that, okay, the develop, I'm sorry, say that again, the developer, that's the way the policies are written, and I don't know if county staff's got anything else right now, but they're internal, I believe that way that reads is internal to the site. I don't believe so. I'd have to go back and look at those.
Also, all the way up to down, places like that's why they're so 37 years we were in the state just saying that Highway 39 only 5 years of his
So I think we're getting into some of the infrastructure, and I got a clarification there on the roadways. Developer, we could talk more about this too. The developers still they're required to do pay their mobility fees. So that goes towards the roadways. Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
The impact fees zones. So a developer pays something in their neighborhood, but it doesn't necessarily go to their neighborhood. It goes in the neighborhood in that impact fee zone. That was the.
Any other questions? Mr. Buddy?
Let the citizens know about this form survey. Very interesting. 30% of 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 100,000. 40% of them longer. 65% has a strong sense of which were interesting. Why would you like to live family-oriented lifestyle, more land, further, etc.? 16% was the next one. If you were available and convenient, would you take public transportation or 60%? Several communities are experiencing widespread development outside city centers, usually previously undeveloped, and believe this issue to Oakland County. 60% else. 27% too much happening. That's too much traffic. What do you feel is the single most important thing that has not kept up with population growth? 60% growth. Please indicate if you agree with all. Corporate plans should discourage or limit new development to protect agriculture and environmental land. 91% said yes. There's also talked to Mr. Kemp and Mr. White last week about the doing away with having to hook up two sewer systems. Take that away and it makes it cheaper for to just use second thing outside. So that's something that's experienced that way. your lots. You don't cost the developer so much. And it's could be a win-win for everybody should know.
Yeah, so that was something discussed on Thursday, planning to respond to, when you were just talking about that survey. On the website. That's-
That mic has had a lot of problems on the Zoom, so I think we're gonna use your mic on both sides. Yeah, all right.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
regarding property located on. He said, well, sometimes that ends up being, you have a piece of property. But we can't do that. That's not wrong. Because of the fact that it has water, and sewer before we can step out for that work. So when we're talking about the developer, we're actually talking about sometimes an individual. So there, so that circulation on.
It's activity.
Area to verify that a minimum of currently they realize all that area is owned by all. Where now acquiring or how do you acquiring that? What is bigger than
So that's talking about it. Parcel. You purchase that property. No, it's not. There's several properties that rezone last year. All were from the property. Prior to. There's several there. There's a. Yeah, there's certainly some that are involved. Are there any other questions? Hey Jay, we were just talking about Yeah, this is just a hypothetical. You'd have to have over 160 acres. This is what we're proposing today. But then, yeah, but again, we were up. You had 200 acres. That's where the 1.5% on the bottom left has some kind of internal neighborhood center, and that's not specifically commercial, but that could be a daycare is becoming quite a bit, so some type of use in that area. And then the streets and the stormwater, those two together, that's a quarter of the site. Typically what streets of the neighborhood, the stormwater requirement, that's a pretty conservative. And then that open space, the 2.5%, that's just internal site. Heard a lot about active spaces, ball field, parks. That's not including all the perimeter buffer housing around the entire property. That goes in. Or if you don't do the perimeter buffer, half acre. But I was getting to that. We would do the perimeter quarter to half acre, or do buffer street. So just in this example alone, I think we're at 14%.
Are they willing?
That's not what we're.
Oh,
Well, but you're, right, that's my, my school, same. That's not. Trying that I see. Sweet.
All right, good questions. So now we really want to get into kind of focused discussion. This is where we get up and devastation. So I think with the group, if you are okay with this, let's do better. That's okay. Just kind of start over. All right, let's do it. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Or start
I think
in order.
we start with changes.
Because out of the, out of
There might-
however many I end up
So
taking,
the people online, I do too.
you know,
I make
never know how many.
75% what I take.
But this is the fun part. Guys are happy with stuff.
Yeah, the last time there were so many people in here, you couldn't get word X. Couldn't even ask.
This is like the school activity, or the school, so we figure out, you know, you get everything workshop, you know, speak, class. We'll be opening those doors later, slot shows. So,
Okay.
fingers crossed. All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I know this is, I have been doing my here a little bit, but, so this gets into, what we were just talking about, and kind of the main concepts of this column showing what's on the books today. Yeah, these are for larger, some of the larger tracks. So buffering and stream is something we talked a lot about, and this earlier, around 70% of the site, now 250, basically football, 70%. Talked about the past, those are set us, there's an exception for a site, so sometimes 70%.
A lot of times, waiver, whatever, but, you know, we don't like, privacy, actual sharing. Instead of artificial.
Yeah. So that's what we're proposing here, and Steve, we were talking about that too, like a sliding scale, whatever, we just like based on site conditions, like B is an arrow, but right now we're saying 100 feet minimum, 200 feet, but, you know, definitely by, as you talked about this, like right in front, and then, so you either do that landscape buffer, or if you don't, larger lots, that's it.
Jared, I just want to sort of reiterate a little bit those workshops. We went through a series of conversations like over weeks, and you're to retain the rural character. And so when you're thinking about, again, as Jared should have showed that sample sort of additional 25% in terms of both, you know, stormwater and then additional. So what we're trying to do is find, you know, put language in the policy that really tries to accomplish the objectives of both landowners, right, as well as the community. So again, for those who haven't been part of those conversations, you might be wondering, well, you know, what does a buffer do? What does a screening do? That's really what it tries to accomplish. And when we're talking about some of the sliding scale, is really to try to accommodate some of those needs. But I think what was really clear that everybody agreed that not a berm that, you know, doesn't really shield, or it's not a, you know, just a fence with nothing behind it. This is really trying to accomplish that. So I just want to reiterate that, because sometimes, you know, we've been at it for a long time, and, you know, sometimes people think that, you know, are we trying to pull fast? But no, we've actually spent a lot of time, and this is a solution that I think that has gotten to, you know, to that point to address that concern. Can we try it without the mic for a little bit?
Happy to do that, no problem. Does that make sense? With Clarence just did a good job of explaining. Yeah, again, that was several meetings. As were there. Does that make sense? Question?
The proposed policy of the distance between houses is 100 feet to 250 feet.
No, that we're really just talking about the perimeter.
Okay.
Based on site conditions, and saying, it's, again, we're working through this with a minimum of 100 feet, unless you have a larger lot.
So when they start putting in these houses and they're densely packed, what is the distance, minimum distance they can have between houses?
That's something in our policies right now, addresses come up. And that's called a setback. That's not something that we really address. As Clarence said, again, we're trying to focus in more on regulates bad word, but it's just really just kind of focus in on the periphery outside looks like. That's more inside where you can see it.
Let me add to that. So I think you're asking between houses because like I know that driving on Baum Road,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the point is, if we're creating this buffer, you're not going to see all these rooftops stacked side by side, and they could vary. They could be tighter, they could be wider, but you're not seeing that. So that's the first part. I think that's why I kind of want to reiterate that. What you're starting to talk about starts also getting into lot type, right? And we'll get into that next. We'll get into that in a little bit. But what that is starting to talk about is really the size of the lots that kind of guide distance between buildings. But I'll say it sort of bluntly in that this is kind of saying from the outside, it's kind of like the donut. If you don't see behind it, and you don't see all those groups, stacked or the buildings close together, that's what we're addressing, which I think is part of your concern.
Well, years ago, I used to be a fire inspector. And you have houses that are built too close together. When this one burns, that one burns, that one burns, and it's just a thing right over. And they're 10 feet apart, which means you can't get a fire truck between them. And plus, you could literally probably, if you got a running start, jump from roof to roof to roof. And, that's way too dense for the number of people. Because, as an example, that up north at 19th, north of Sun City, when they put in those houses, they were expecting, 4 people in this house and 4 people, and parking space for 2 cars. Well, you go over there now, and there are people parked all over the place. There's many people, 12, 15 people in a house, and it's become, I guess, for lack of a better term, a ghetto. And if there's a fire in there, it's going to be nearly impossible for a fire truck to get in there.
Right.
And so what I'd like to see is to have a larger set off between houses of, no less than 25 feet.
So, and again, what I want to do is I want to just get through this, if there's other boards that kind of get to that.
Okay.
I don't want to sort of, but I will say that at least answer part of that is one of the solutions that we've identified is the minimum lot size is 50 feet, right? So that is one of the things that has, in the past, you could get a smaller lot. So it kind of gets to that point. But Nicole actually reminded me of a really good thing is that you guys could put your comments on these forms and fill it out and hand it back before you leave. That would be able to capture some of those comments. And that, again, I'll say it just one time for everybody is we're really trying to, we've gone through many meetings, talked a lot. And this is,
we haven't solved anything yet. That's what we're here to do.
so that's exactly it. We're trying to be able to document, and we have documented things in the past, it's not that we haven't. But this is an opportunity where we presented this material to the planning commission. We had the work session with the board. This is kind of rubber is getting the road. So we have to start wrapping this up. And so your comments are crucial in terms of being able to be incorporated so that we can try to wrap up. Otherwise, we could be at this a long time. But
We've been at it a long time.
it could be a lot longer,
I
so
need to
try
make
not to.
a statement on that. You said, the 50 foot or 100 foot, so it's back there so we can't see it. It's not that, we don't want to just hide the 40 foot lots either. It's
Right.
just because you hide it, don't mean it's still not there, don't mean it's still not compatible. We still want the, you know, the bigger lots, the different, house styles and stuff like that. Just, you know, just because the eyes is behind the curtain doesn't mean it's not there.
Right, so, and buddy, you remember that at one of the workshops, I said, we're trying to break down these issues one by one so that we can come with solutions, because oftentimes if we put them all together, we have a harder time to kind of
And
solve.
from day one, I said it's lot sizes and buffer. We fix those two things, everything else is gonna fall into place.
Yep.
And we're still working on lot sizes and buffer a year and a half later.
And I'm not sure you, I feel as if we've made quite a bit of progress over the last, I mean, you know, from where we started. So let's continue, because again, for everybody's sort of time, let's keep on going through, you know.
Yeah, and like Clarence said, we're definitely jotting down the conversation, but please feel, like Clarence said too, I feel like we've come a long way by buffers to now there's best landscaping. Just trying to find what's that.
70%, 14%.
What's that?
So you went from 70% perimeter to 14% now, so.
No, that's incorrect. We're talking about the entire perimeter of the site now. So that's a change from 70%.
Right, I think 70% was a linear circumference of it. Now we're talking about the full buffer. 100% of the buffer is what we're talking about. As you saw on the slide, if you even, it looks thin,
Right.
but that was 100 feet and 200 feet.
Yeah,
Right.
it's hard to tell.
It's a large site, it's a 200-acre site. So you didn't see it as well, but that's why I wanted Jared to kind of go over it, because it is 100 feet.
And we have more, that's why I want to leave here and I want it to be clear on what we're talking about and where and maybe we have some more work to do. We're talking about, I want to make sure it makes sense. In fact, all right, so that was number 1, I believe, Nicole.
It was the second bullet on page 1. So again, if you have any of your reactions, if you have different ideas about what should be incorporated into policies, please write those down. That question.
So Jared, you didn't touch upon, maybe on this board, the 3 lot.
Yeah. We're starting to get into that. And really kind of been trying to figure out, buddy, I know you say half acres or greater, so we're trying to come up with what that mixture looks like. So we've got three today, no less than 20% right. So what we're trying to do again is the right, not that, but we're talking about a lot of things that are really close together, trying to avoid that. Some probably, but you probably don't think we've gone far enough, right? You want just one lot to
you went from 40 to 50, but just as long as we don't go to 60 and 70, and that's a 3 lot size, we gotta have acre lots in there somewhere.
Yeah, and we do. And the difference now again is the perimeter saying have that buffer.
And so to your point, the perimeter, if you look at it, perimeter lots are either acre or half-acre lots, perimeter. That's one type that is clearly identified as a perimeter lot. You can do other large lots in between, but again, we wanted to make sure that it's flexible, that we're not, making it possible to do anything, right? Because oftentimes we kind of get into a situation where, it just doesn't make sense, and then everybody's looking away. We're really trying to make sure that this works.
That's true. What is the advantage of having wiring at least 3 lot types? What if the developer wanted to build a development of all having lot size? You can't do that because you have 3. So now I'm going to build smaller ones in there. What is the advantage of having?
That's something we're still trying to get on. You're trying to work opposite of someone else just do small ones. So I don't think quite
I guess for distinction, there's a threshold of 160 acres. This is what we're talking about, greater than 160 acres. And so I guess your point is if you were right. And naturally, so the question from developers, what we've heard from the developers' perspective is they're not going to, for 160 or 200, they're not going to do all half-acre lots. And so to Buddy's point is wanting to have that diversity. And so, for instance, under the current policies, they can build up to clustering, up to 2 units per acre. So the lot mix allows them the flexibility to figure out what that mix is. So you saw that example that we showed up on the slides, that 200-acre lot ended up having 106 acres remaining developable. So that allows them to get 2 units per acre, and it really then is a mixture of how do you get there in terms of, you know, the number of lots. That's kind of where it's a little bit of a math question, which is why I like this diagram, because it really is math, right? You've got to have to divide the number of pieces in there. You got to figure out. And so what we heard from the community was, as Buddy was saying, not just one size, small. And so it gives us a little bit more, you know, variety in there, and it tries to address a little bit of.
And I was gonna say, was it variety that people require? And as one of the vernacular of peak cutter homes has gotten to be, there's a building. And the families, like, some people want a 2-story house, they have kids, and there's another one comes a regular house. And that diagram.
No, because remember, it's based on the total acreage. Is a 200-acre parcel with a maximum of 2 units per acre. So you only get 400, up to 400.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Doesn't cut that out.
Right. Again,
Really, oh, you renovate them.
no, 400.
Okay, is it gonna be a requirement like the now RP2? You must build at the maximum?
No.
Is that clause going to be taken out?
There is no positive.
Yes, there is. Right now in RP2, you must build up to the maximum. You have 200 acres, you have to build 400 houses,
It's
or
the,
you can't do it.
it's the clustering ratio. The clustering ratio is being removed.
Yes, that's
Okay.
good.
So that allows for compatibility, greater compatibility when you can have a conversation about how big the lots are, how many homes should be there, because no longer will every development be almost, as you say, required to have 400 units because the clustering is gone. That also, Buddy, what you were talking about earlier with the open space.
Right.
That's why you always think of 40%, because you have to cluster, and what's left over very often is right around 40%. If the clustering ratio is gone, that allows people to put those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 square foot lots, or the half acre or the 1 acre lots. So that's why the open space that is dedicated in the HOA will shrink dramatically, because more of the land will be in private ownership.
So this is a perfect segue. I'm going to keep this moving.
Just past 6.
Okay. This is a perfect segue. And y'all were hitting on this perfect. What's that? You know, that over math class now. Perfect percent. So that's where we're trying to figure out. We're hitting on that. You know, yeah, it's 400. Yeah, it's clustered. But this whole exercise starts to talk about the larger lots that was mentioned, the half acre greater. And what we've done here is we've got different higher levels groupings, larger lots, smaller lots, or start getting a mixture. Try to do is cover with objective pros and cons. So that's another one.
I mean, and again, the list of pros and cons could be higher or whatever, but it gives us a little bit of sense of conversation. And I'll sort of pick one up, and Jared, you can kind of go through some of the others. You know, one of those things that we heard, right, was, you know, and this is a question, is affordability, right? How affordable is housing down here? So one of the things that happens with larger lots is that they will end up becoming custom homes, right? And so those lots, those houses will probably end up being over $500,000 a lot. So, which, again, I mean, I just went from a perspective, you know, we're just trying to put information out there, and you all can make the decisions, you know, as need be. Versus a smaller lot, obviously they're more affordable, but yes, they get a little closer in together. So that's just one of those things that as while we are sort of developing, looking at the policies, we're trying to ask these questions because remember, this is comprehensive plan, you know, update, if you wish, for the land use component. And so trying to be able to understand that, because if you all kind of say, you know, affordability is really important, we just want to make sure you guys understand that larger lots out there.
I'm not sure, but that was the least thing it's for over.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so,
I don't know, you want to hit upon any?
yeah, I mean, I think we were hitting on, you know, in that example again, 53% of the site, so it was 106 acres. So we're just trying to be objective about it. So if you do the half acre greater, that is a potential reduction. Can't make it to that 400.
So are you considering, or are you talking about the removing the requirement to hook up to,
That's something we're
utilities?
definitely talking about.
Mr. Lee? Is that, would that be if the requirement to hook up to, septic and water outside urban services, is that a plus for? Would it entice larger lots?
Don't have public water and sewer required to have acre lots in order to develop.
That's it.
And at some point, it jumps up to the peak.
That's not.
Right.
So I represent, develop finished hospital. National home builders that you see around town, busted, now. They do 15 wide lot. Let's go to like well septic. And get custom home builders, smaller home builders. That's the spectrum. Awesome. My house. That gets back to price. Barely get house. These days, pricing will above and beyond daily thought. So 90% of buyers, they would buy.
I don't know if you've priced the cost of a well recently in excess of $10,000. And if you're on top of that, a septic system or such as a, is, you know, so you're looking at $25,000 on the cheap side for well and sewer or well and septic.
It's probably $100,000 per house.
Spread out over, say, 160 acres. Spread out that. Let me tell you what that is. Jim was correct. And put it well.
Mhm.
Overall, you water sewer.
Yeah.
Less.
But even on a, if you do have a community, you can have a couple of major wells providing that community with all the water.
You can have
And then-
one house and
And
a
then,
well.
and then have drain fill, even for 2 houses. Or something like that.
Perhaps.
I don't know, buddy.
Yeah, and the question really is, we haven't answered that question with, remember, well and septic, you know, individual lots, we're talking like over 160 acres, right? So that's a lot of well and septic, and whether or not, you know, as a community, you gotta think about, you know, if something fails. So again, because we had talked about even, you know, package plans for, sewer.
Yeah.
And if that fails, who picks up the tab? Where does people go to? They'll go to the county. And that's part, and just be honest, that's part of this conversation is, as citizens, you're gonna end up hanging on the back end. So again, this is just information. I'm not trying to steer you in one way or the other, but that's part of this, trying to think through the pros and cons of, going from water and sewer, well and septic, lot sizes, lot mix.
What is the show? Are they all? Which one? And what? They're on one.
And then there's
Really would
the,
not be permitted as, well and septic size of that.
the water situation that we currently have in the south end of Hillsborough County, where the people like down at Fit in the Sundance area get a trickle because they're at the end of the pipeline. And that's supposedly not going to be maintained or brought up to code or to usage qualities within 5 years. So if those people were all put on the same line of needing water that may be coming in, how would the county supply it?
Right, and again, that is part, I think, of the conversations is, and, again, you all know that the county had purchased a large piece of land, in the Balm area.
Yeah.
And, that is for public use. So, I think the conversations have been very specific in trying to improve the water, availability, the pressure and all that stuff. I mean, at least from my perspective, again, not speaking for the county, if you have a lot of wells and a lot of wells, that is also going to affect because, your aquifer. So you're just having a lot more people for offering it. So trying to be able to balance that out is, I think, an important part of, managing.
I have 4 acres east of Wyoming, and when I bought the property, it was 150-foot deep well within the had droughts and all kinds of problems, and the farmers around there have the 4 and 12-inch wells, and they suck me dry. So I had to come back in and put a 300-foot well in, and sometimes we have good water and sometimes we don't. It all depends on the farmers. Now, when you sell all this property to become houses, I won't have the farmer's property. Problem. I'll have another problem.
If they're all on wells.
Yes.
So that's why there's this conversation is very important, thinking about the consequences.
I will tell you, I took Commissioner Cohen on a tour of Balm last Friday, and the water did come up as an issue and real concerning. And he did talk about, he sits on Tampa Bay water, that in the next, within 5 years, there's going to be a phase in. He says it will not be a problem like 6 years out. That Hillsborough County should have enough water to sustain it and all the growth.
That was the fall improvements that he was talking
Yes, and they're putting in a booster pump. They're running the new 42-inch main down Balm Wyoming, 674 to 301, and several other things. But
correct. Yes, I know we're getting close. So yeah, so we really kind of hit that, the affordability. We're trying to come up with objective pros and cons. Got into the smaller lots. This could be the 40, 50, 60, less than per acre. So one of the pros we talked about, it is more compact. Efficient. Like that's where you could have the water and sewer that you find. We talked about less of the, that's where you have your space. We haven't always really liked that the way the buffer is today. Or affordability, walkability. So those are some of the pros we talked about. The potential for developers to hold up to that may be a pro or con for some, right? If hit that 400 units we were just talking about in that example, that 200 example. So that really gets into kind of the efficiency of the plan. Developers, we also say the cons, right? It's what we've seen out there. You're getting just 40-foot lots we talked about, and they're really close together. Or a periphery, it doesn't fit. As you come on 672, it's a big character. So that's the biggest con, right? It's less diverse housing types. Put a con served by municipal water, sewer. Maybe that's not going to be as much of a con in the future, like you said. So yeah, that's kind of the smaller lot discussion. And then the last item we have mixture of lots. So that's where again we're trying to figure out what could an agreeable mixture. So it's the goals of set the bomb and it's something there. allows for different home types, certain price points, and potential for increased efficiency. So we do have kind of
Before you jump into oh, you want to ask the survey?
Yeah, so all of the topics that we just discussed are mostly listed on this survey here, on this page. So if you all could just take a few minutes and rate how important you feel about these items, from not at all important to very important to you. So this is a chance to provide your feedback, how you feel about all of these things that we just talked about.
And again, it's a real short list, and the reason why I wanted to bring this out is we kind of skipped over this, but we had talked about in the presentation, which is really the hot key points are, that we wanted to maintain the rural character. That's where I thought we had agreements. We had varying housing types. We prefer some of the larger lots for open space. The buffering that we talked about. We didn't really talk about as much about commercial, but really trying to focus commercial and something that's usable. And that's what you've heard today really is, in terms of the policy focuses, is having the large, slots and community benefits we'll get to in a minute. So really and again, as Nicole kind of said, it's kind of maybe about 10 or 12 kind of, we just want to capture your input in terms of, do you think it's really important or not important in terms of, rural character, diversity of residents, all that stuff. If you guys can just take a minute and sort of just quickly sort of fill that out, that would be very helpful.
Got it.
All right.
Gold star.
We're gonna start the Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's something we're still working through right now. Right now.
And I think part of it is as I understand, that piece, but also working with the school.
I would like to mention, I wish the north parcel and the mall would have separated, not included. We talked about two different.
That north that's
yeah.
out there.
We can talk about different issues up there versus different issues involved.
Well, why don't you put, if it helps, put like bomb and.
I'm pretty much here to talk about all.
It's different.
Let me ask the reason they didn't.
Right. And on the first page, you can see it where, there's an opportunity to provide your, feedback on the policy. So things like that, if there are some real clear, some strong thoughts you all have, that's the opportunity. The rain, I'm not sure how big of a group you're gonna get.
All right. Thank you. One more. I do.
That's just.
Oh.
That was gonna be, that was.
But we didn't. Another presentation started online too, right?
Yes.
So what we can do.
Oh, no, it can't run simultaneously.
Oh, because of my-
Well, no, because I think we only have the one Zoom account with both meetings scheduled one after the other.
I think like finishing off the research here.
Oh, as long as it's not recorded or,
Suggesting was, since we have two people, you can, and we're scheduled to start at 6:30 presentation. You can walk
the agenda board with folks here on stage. And you can do that.
Do we have
That would be a, let's see, hold on. Or if folks are thinking just walk through. Real interest. Real doing.
Thing was now 7:05 and 6:30, so.
Okay. I see you're hard at work on your handout. Are there any
I'm
questions I
just
can
wondering if
answer
you're gonna
for
be able
you?
to read my writing.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I used to teach 12-year-olds, so it can be
Oh.
worse than that.
I used to be a state trooper, so I was like.
So, yep, this is super important for us, and then the survey
I
as
don't
well.
live in this area, but I go to church in this area. And it's a small church, one Baptist church.
Mhm.
And we have this developer who owns the property behind us is planning on running an 80-foot right of way through our land. And, you know, he said it, you know, we'd like to do this, so it's too bad. So,
I like a lot of things.
yeah, so we don't have right of way. We're not giving it up, but, you know,
So,
fighting them.
and showing up to things like this is how things change and how the county takes some
Most of the
feedback.
people that go to the church, they're very elderly, or they work, and they can't make it to these meetings.
Right.
But I can,
And you'll speak for them.
I will.
I appreciate that.
So I have been unretired from the state. I've had many other jobs, and I don't have any problem standing up and speaking out. And so,
Well, you seem like you really know your stuff.
well, I actually started years ago when the Waimama Community Association was starting up, and it was like half all attorneys and fighters. And so, you know, we agreed to say 4 houses per acre. Well, they turned that around and said, well, you know, we can do 8, or we can do 16, we can do 38. I'm like, you know, if you could do 38 per acre and I have 4 acres, I could be a multimillionaire just by selling the lots. But I can't because it's not zoned that way. So they want to do all these zone changes. You know, we stood firm and everything. I don't know if they finally got it down to because I had a job and I had to go around the state.
Right.
So I didn't make it all the meetings. But, you know, if putting in septic tanks will limit the number of people that are moving up there, and we can still have it pretty much like it is now, where people are owning half-acre lots or acre lots, even though that's way too many septic tanks. And that's way too many wells. It still is better than having this cluster of hundreds of houses, and the county does not build a road until it absolutely has to build a road.
That's not one of those.
If you go down, if you go down Waimama Road now, it's bouncing all the way because they have all those trucks that are hauling dirt.
Right.
So, no, I can remember 2 times in the last 30 years that they paved the road. So,
They're right now focusing all of their funds, I guess, on the urban service boundary.
Yeah.
It's just something that comes up every time and time again. But, you know, like Jared said, there's this push and pull of population is coming.
oh yeah,
There's
we know
population
it's
growth.
coming.
People are coming, and at the same time,
there's the reality of the infrastructure.
Now, with the way the prices of land is going, I paid $50,000 for 4 acres with the house on it. And 1989. I mean, you can't even touch it for that much. People with just open land are selling it for 100,000 or more. And so poor people are not going to be moving out there.
Right.
And so
Because it's also not
not
people
close to
with,
town.
it's not close enough to town and where the
No,
jobs
bus
are.
service.
Essentially, there's
Yeah.
no public transportation. People tend to have less cars per household.
Yeah. And so from what I sat through and listened to the guy that's in charge of the bus services, you know, you have 2 buses a day that come to Waimama. And I'm like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You can't go to work and come back on
Right. Right. God forbid you miss the bus.
Yeah,
or
you missed the
something
bus, sure.
happens.
So well, you're just gonna have to hitchhike.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you never know who you're picking up with all the migrants that we have that come and go out of this area. Just maybe they don't know it. Tampa, but it's thousands.
Yeah.
And I used to be a state trooper here, and I used to sit on the other side of my mama where they were leaving out, and I would just count the cars that I know do not have a driver's license.
Yeah.
And because my theory was if they look at you, they may have a license, but if they look straight ahead and they don't look at you, they definitely don't have a license.
Yeah.
So I could spend every day taking some to jail.
Yeah.
But and then on the way home. So anyway, I just know that there's a large number of people in this town, better than 65% that do not have a driver's license and then do not have insurance. They have a car, but
Right.
usually a stolen tag. So, you know, we have that people here, and then across the highway, you have rich people. And so, and then when
Told Marianne was 5 minutes. I didn't want to rush you.
Thank you. Thank you. See you on Saturday. So I can get this sell some. Does it? Does it? So like your sell is miles. So, well, I get that. Everybody else in our response to how you know. How about this is it doesn't go. And like the current business and traffic. But it says like you call me or you. So the money thing is
Mary Ann, can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Hello?
hear you now.
Yeah, we can hear you for a second.
Hold on. Okay, Mary Ann, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can now. Okay, so it's going to be a little different this time, learning from our mistakes and stuff. So we're not going to be using the microphone system because apparently that sounds really bad with the virtual people. So we're going to be doing just like I'm doing now. Jared's going to do his presentation the second time, and then we're going to switch to the format that we had towards the end, where we'll be using the different computer with the desktop microphone. So hopefully everybody virtually will be able to hear the discussions a lot better. Does that make sense to everybody, I hope?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Okay, great. Then we'll be getting started shortly. So, yeah, get some of these folks to, oh, yeah. Oh, it's not that heavy.
They always look heavier than they are, right? I can almost like sit down with them.
Yeah, the only thing is just so that the, all right, so let's see.
Hey, Jared?
We're going to have to sit over here. We got that way. They'll be in person. It's like, yeah, they're always on.
No, these mics will not be on while he's speaking. When he's
yeah.
done speaking, then these mics will go live.
So when you sit down right now, the mics are not on. You can do whatever you want to do. And when the presentation turned on, so speak to people who don't. I wanted to understand that by the specific.
Yeah, it's,
It wouldn't disturb.
right. No, but we'll let you know when it's,
What's your name again?
Here.
I did too. You guys are into the personal.
Sure. I drove through all of that. No, it wasn't. It provided more traffic.
Yep, understood. I'm gonna have to see if I can say roof.
Okay, so you guys online can hear me just fine?
Yeah, I can hear you, although that a little bit choppy
you at
towards the end.
Okay. Alrighty, so Jared, just since this is what's going to be picking up your voice.
Oh, so you want me to stay here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Until we switch to those, then you can walk all over.
I tend to be a walker. That's my problem.
Yeah, that's like turning this one on far away.
Oh, really? Wow, that's fun. That was up here. It's cool. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. For those in the back, hopefully this is going to be very similar to what you heard and some of those online. So really today, thanks again for coming. We're talking about the residential Planned-2 area. And as you saw, we had some activity over there that we're going to go through. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is just a quick recap of what we're doing with the study. Some of y'all have already talked to you a little bit about that and the policy changes that we're looking at. And then we do have 4 station activities, and I'll run through those here pretty soon. Remember, there's a little bit of a lag. It's really just this map. Okay, so this is really just highlighting the area we're talking about here today. Really, the pink area is the area that's under a moratorium for residential rezonings. And we're calling that kind of the Bomb Village plan area. And then in that yellow color, that's also RP2. So really what we're talking about, what we're focusing on for policy changes are in that pink and that yellow area. It's really what we're focused on. And then in that kind of purple dashed line, that's the Bomb community plan area. So there was a plan that was put together several years ago. And the hashing, the blue hashing, if you can see it, that basically is the urban service area. What we're really talking about tonight, what we're focused on is the comprehensive plan amendment, and that sets up higher level policies for the area. And then the land development code, which is kind of the plan bill, that's the specific regulation. So if someone comes in and wants to develop or wants to try to develop, they have to follow that set of rules. So those are the 2 things that we're really focused on updating. And then there are a number of things, we like this slide. It's kind of a balance beam. There's several things that we're trying to balance for a workable solution. And so there, the big thing, and we were just talking about this, is population growth coming into Florida, the Tampa Bay area. And also in this, in this area, we've seen it, the need for infrastructure, the roads that we were talking about, that's been a consistent theme, providing that infrastructure, improving infrastructure, maintaining that rural character that's here today versus a lot of the development we've seen has had that kind of clustered where you kind of group homes together in an area. And so they're trying to balance that. And then the desire, a lot of what we heard is large lots versus more open space. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by community benefits. And the 5th one, again, what we're looking at is larger parcels. You have to have up to 160 acres in the BOM area to be able to develop 2 units per acre versus the entitlements for those that may want to develop but have less than 160 acres. So those are some things that we're trying to balance. What we're not really talking about tonight are the environmental sensitive land credit or where you have unaggregated parcels in that north area, that yellow area I was talking about, or that pink area, bomb plan area. So you really have to kind of have 50 acres in the north, 160 acres in the south. And we're also not hitting kind of the broader infrastructure questions. I mean, that's a big deal, but we're not looking at the infrastructure outside of the RP2 area. I want to highlight, we've really been working hard, talking to different stakeholders from BOM Civic Association, citizens in BOM, to developers, land use attorneys. Had a series of meetings starting in April through June, and we really got focused in on just specific topics. So what do new developments look like? What are some of the neighborhood designs that we look at? What are some of the policies that we update? And then we did have some general sessions, one in April 1st and one in May 22nd. So again, a lot of this, we've got boards for this, and we can talk more about this after the presentation. So all those meetings I just showed you, this boils it up. You can get the Cliff Notes version just on this one slide. And so the concerns that we've heard obviously are that, the compatibility, the rural character, need for better infrastructure, and then the consistency and predictability of development. And through all the different discussions that we had, there were a lot of points of agreement. We did talk about maintaining, everyone agreed, kind of, let's look at maintaining the rural character. Let's look at varying just different home types. A lot of folks we talked about those 40-foot kind of cookie cutter home types. People haven't really been agreeable to those. Importance of offering screening, like what looks on that. In commercial areas and certain locations in BOM. And something a lot of folks talked about is just looking at lighting. Dark sky communities is a term where it's not lit up dark, really light at night. So looking at that. So again, we've got a whole board for this. I gave you a lot of information, but the whole point is there's a lot of concerns, but there's been some agreement, a lot of work that's gone into kind of the proposed policies that we're working on. It's not perfect, but it's what we've been working on. And then everything I've talked about is kind of reiterated on the right-hand side. Things that the policies are addressing are open space, the development pattern, community benefits, and just compatibility with the area. So that is a lot to go through. And again, we'll get into more discussion on that. So then we have other materials and boards that get into, let me skip, okay, oops, sorry guys. We have another board over there, and I do want to really kind of try to see all the handout. We want to make sure that you guys fill it out and talk about these boards in more detail. But this is we're transitioning to what are we actually talking about? What are the policies we're talking about here? So something that we're really focused on is what is the look and the feel of the development pattern. So today, if somebody comes in and wants to develop, they have to aggregate, get a larger piece of property, 160 acres again in the south, 50 in that north area. And they're required to do a 250-foot buffer around 70% of the area. That's just basically a football field. There's no requirements as far as landscaping. So on the right, that's where we've been trying to address, let's screen the development. And if you have a certain narrow or lot width that goes in the inside of the development, and so you really can't see it as much from the outside. We're also not dictating a set open space or park space. So we've got a smaller 2.5% in there. The biggest thing that I'd like to hit on is the clustering. That's something that's a requirement today. So if you have a property, a developer is required to cluster up to a certain percentage. They have to just think of a square. They have to cluster it all in one area and preserve. Basically, essentially, it's preserving other parts of the land. We're not requiring that anymore. We're, again, just dictating what happens on the outside of that square, if you will, just to simplify it. So we're really getting into kind of the meaty topic. Again, we've got boards for these. The other thing that we're looking at is it's just trying to incentivize different lot types. We heard this at BOCC, the half-acre lots are greater, and doing that on just any development, larger development, doing that on well and septic. what we have right now is really, we're really encouraging 3 different lot types and getting a mixture. And again, we're trying to address that outside of the square. So and we've got a graphic where we'll show this, where you do either buffering or screening or larger lots on the outside. And then community benefits. So we've got, this is where we really want to get some of your input tonight. We've listed up to 14 different benefits. And what that means is a developer would be required, there's a tiering system based on the size of their project. They would have to provide a certain number of community benefits. So we want to hear about, and we've got this kind of listed, and we want you to vote and help us prioritize it. What's most important to you all? And there's there's areas where you can do free. There's things that we've missed on the list, or you just don't agree with it. We're trying to understand what's the biggest priority. So that gets into, again, we have a board, and essentially all we're saying here on the slide is we have community benefits have like 5 main themes. It's infrastructure improvements, neighborhood design, land dedication for different community services such as parks, civic space. And then we also have offsite residential or commercial development. That's something today you have to do for larger development. You have to provide a certain amount of commercial. We're saying right now you don't have to do that. You provide some non-residential uses like daycares. Or you could do commercial, but it would be a community benefit. So I'm transitioning now a little bit into what we heard and what we've been talking about is some folks from the community have wanted larger lots. So that was talked about at BOCC and doing larger lots. And then some from the development community look at smaller lots because that's more efficient to have the water sewer hookups. It's more of an efficient development pattern. But then we get the cookie cutter lots right now. And then there's another thing we're looking at, a mixture of lots to provide. Is there a possibility to provide larger and smaller lots? So I want you to be thinking about this for kind of the exercises in your packet, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail, because that really rolls into this example. And Nicole over here helped us put this together, and I think this kind of starts to show you what we're talking about graphically. This is just a hypothetical situation if there was a 200-acre parcel, and what we're trying to communicate in that upper left is almost a quarter of that development would just be taken up with roadway hookups or roadway infrastructure or stormwater. So that would be required. And these are kind of our proposed policies. And then on the bottom left, you'll see what we're saying. You'd have to provide a neighborhood center, 1.5% of the area. And that could be some of your non-residential uses like the daycares to provide services to the community. And then 2.5% for internal open space. And then what's kind of shown on the outside of the square is the buffering. So we're requiring like the landscaping and the buffering, and then or the larger perimeter lots. And so that makes up about anywhere from, what is it, Nicole, like 20 to 40% of the development. And what you're left with is about 50% or greater is remaining for developable land. So this is really the crux of why we're talking about lot types. If you do half acre or 1 acre, some may find that favorable, others may not, right? Some may want to build 400 units and you can't do it if you do half acre or 1 acre lots. So we're trying to figure out the workable solution. So again, I know we're throwing a lot out at you, but this is in your packet and we'll go over this in more detail. So some of the recommendations that we had with the BOCC, talked about this last week. Staff has really been looking at this. At time of rezoning, BOCC would have to conduct a compatibility evaluation. And that's just, again, kind of a check to see, does it fit what we're trying to get from a development? So that goes into that site plan approval process. We talked about different requirements. We just went through buffering and screening. So that's something where through that site plan approval process, there could be a mechanism to really kind of have a public meeting and get community input to make sure we're getting what we want to see out here. The county's also working on policies for, biggest thing has been that timing and phasing. We talk about, why don't we build roads before we develop? So that's where we're trying to get set up policies and look at that in more detail so that we have the infrastructure in place. So just kind of a schedule, we're running through different public hearings and meetings through July and August. The moratorium for that area in the pink, pretty close to y'all, runs through December 31st right now. So we're getting to the point where we're crunch time, really through all the meetings that we've gone through, really trying to come up with that workable solution and tie that down for kind of those August, October meetings. I know I went through a lot of information. It's getting late in the evening. What I want to do right now is just kind of open up for questions with y'all, and we'll go ahead and we've got the boards over there, so we can spend some more time over there. But right off the cuff, any kind of questions for me at this point?
Additionally, not accept. When you go down someone road down, there's trucks, a lot of traffic. It's just, you know, they're going back to house, whatever. The roads are bad. So they did a little bit of patch work here a while back, and you go down the road, dump trucks are coming, and you just watch for it, it starts to bounce sideways. I can see side. It's just, you know, developers bother. We can't stop. I was up nice. We can't stop. It's just, you know, and now, break 6 in the Lord's race. Yeah. Miles an hour for most of it. Now it's 46, and there's a big 35 piece. It's just a long way, long 45. You do the traffic, you do the speed limit, you look at your mirror up the minute, you're like 6 or 8 cars behind you, some typed up truck flying around everywhere. That's
the one that keeps coming up. Yeah.
And we talked a little while ago how to get on 7. Really good. Plenty of places to put another interchange. Same, I don't know, or DOT on state. But if you go up north, you come off one interstate, off one ramp, you got to merge, but get on another one.
Y'all say 672 is the biggest priority for you? 672, is that the biggest priority for y'all?
672, all my one work.
Because that's right where all the traffic from, at least this southern, is gonna be, it's right
That-
in.
Tied to Big Bend. They're all coming south because they can't go west. They come south to go west.
Yeah, there's not that.
I'm
direct-
south of 672 and I can't even get to 672. I go south to get to 674.
674, yeah.
I go 8 miles out of my way.
Some of that's being improved. Yeah, and it's unfortunately for so long. So now there's mobility fees that have increased. So the developer would have to pay their mobility fee. But the problem with roadway and infrastructure is it takes so many years just to get it. Anytime you even get a project approved, it
Exactly
takes a
the
while.
point. But we keep piling onto that and getting further and further behind while developments keep getting approved in max.
I called once about, the fact that there's a flashing red light for Rodine Road, Road, that, I mean, immediately north of it, there is an actual stoplight where there doesn't even really need to be one, but right there, the traffic, I counted 112 cars. When I got through it and I was headed on them coming south. So that each one has to stop, wait for the four-way traffic to go, and when I call the county about what, you already have the electricity there, you already have a light there, why can't you change it to a red, green, yellow stop light that would keep the traffic flowing? The person told me that it was on the 8-year plan, whatever that is, I don't.
I'm sorry, that was Rodine and which cross section?
Rodine and
Fawn River.
Okay.
It's just, and talk about it. What? Our son-in-law house just north of us. He's in here. And water strands. He comes right out in the they block this out. They're gonna lower it 2 days to 1 day. Says they'll have it fixed. How's that going?
So I would offer, what are we doing to slow development down to a point where we can catch up on the infrastructure so that the 1 billion plus estimate of backlog in infrastructure upgrades is addressed and not growing? At a minimum, not getting any bigger. I mean, I know other communities who have done, in my travels around the country, that have mandated infrastructure upgrades ahead of massive developments. It shouldn't be upon the burden of current residents to pay for those increases. So my question is, what other communities have been looked at, especially ones that have dealt with infrastructure first? I know you guys said you've looked at a variety of things. You've looked at things in around the county, but I think our county is the epitome of what not to do. So I'm interested to hear what other communities outside of this county have been looked at on ways that they could have gotten things right.
You're talking specifically to the structure.
Well,
We're all in loaded question.
that I could use that on multiple instances on everything from development trip capture that we like to talk about. They like to use that as a reason for building these big developments in the rural areas without the supporting infrastructure. But there's been a gross inadequacy in the maximum amount of trip capture in these developments. The whole purpose of RP2 was to restrict urban growth in the rural area. But it was routinely ignored. The community plans that we have built and worked with the county to develop have been ignored. So again, what else have we looked at on how things have as examples of getting things right?
And I tried to frame that. Obviously, infrastructure is the biggest concern. We could talk about that all night. All week, right? So that's the issue. I am going to want to focus on 4 specific items at the same. And what I will say is there's policies on the infrastructure that are in place, right, or that we're working through. As far as other areas with policies that we have right now, those ones we used other kind of, there's others out there like Sarasota, Manatee, and we can talk more about specifics. So we have looked at other areas. But yeah, that infrastructure,
Is that articulated anywhere that we can go and review it?
as far as which area,
What has been looked at so we can understand the context of the comparison?
I don't think I've got anything specific to what you're looking.
Has,
Okay. I want to move us off this infrastructure discussion because we could literally
Good.
talk.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
The pros come.
Yep.
County hasn't been structured with the roads. Water. But you look at Tico. Tico sees it. They've got a line of energy right out in that area. They've been solar. They see it.
And the water situation too. And I think that's something we'll go through that and we can look at this more in detail, but part of the community benefits exercise we have, that's why I'm moving quickly because I want to spend some time on it. That's the biggest thing you can say is give us that feedback because we keep hearing it in these meetings too, that infrastructure, like if you have community benefits, just make one and make it infrastructure. That should be top one. So that's where I want to make sure we have time to get through that. And
So real quick before we go into the exercises, the gentleman's point on the infrastructure is not something that he is alone in. That is something that we've heard throughout all of this planning process. It's also what we hear where we are today. We're in Waimama, right? This is school for Waimama down 674. We hear about it quite often there as well. One of the things that we struggle with, sir, is exactly what you're asking, is how do we end up getting development to pay for infrastructure, or how can we prime the pump to get the county to actually do some infrastructure? So you will notice if you look, there are no roads on your capital improvements program out in the service area. This is something that we have had conversations with the community about. And it's something that we have told the board that these are things that the community is infrastructure is out of their communities. One of the things that Jared has in this plan is to ask for a mobility plan so that you can start looking at exactly what you're talking about. Where are the choke points in your system? We're talking about low use, the Balm River View Road is one of these choke systems. The county knows that is, that's why it's on their plan at that 8 years. But it is, like you say, what does that do for me today? Not 8 years. So there needs to be that conversation of where we are today and where we're going, which is part of what we're having with the community, into your effect of how can we actually have that change before it happens? That is the $25,000 question, because part of what we were doing, certainly here in Waimama, because of some of their infrastructure issues, we were talking about community districts, community redevelopment areas, all of these different tax districts that can pump money right into a community. But these are things that the county does not actively pursue in their areas. So we went through a lot of these exercises. So I just want to bring that out because, again, some of those conversations you're having, sir, about where else have we looked for answers, we've had a lot of those conversations with the community as well as with the county on where we can have some of those answers. One of the ways in which Jared will be able to tell you about over in the exercises in a minute are some of those community benefit options, which allow the community, the county, and the developer to have a conversation about what is something in this new community that that developer can provide for that new community that would benefit the larger community. So some of that can be hard infrastructure stuff, such as roadways, but it can also be some of the other things that may be internet access that is kind of spotty out here at times. Or it could be additional open space, green space, could be parks. There's a variety of different things. So we don't have all the answers, but we've certainly been asked the questions, and we've certainly been asking the questions. I just wanted to put that out there to see if that helps, sir, with some of the other conversations that I think you were looking for in that answer. Yeah. Oh, and it's not just the 5 that are here in the room. For the past year, that's been the #1 concern, has been roadway infrastructure in this area in the water.
You know, I followed this project down 672 and just come around this rubber. And there was a guy in the back of the shovel shovels full of asphalt. That's it. I'm just kept driving along. Now, what good that? I mean, the traffic comes along, the stuff is just knocked down. I mean, I just like summing your notes at.
Is there?
I mean, it needs to be painted. Drive over it, it's like this, you know, people are driving in margin.
So.
I mean, they're not even gonna fix what's already broken in the road. What hope that they're better
As
accommodate
as
next
folks look to.
car. That we're not gonna face stuff in our house
Yeah, there's,
every morning for 3 hours and every afternoon.
there's a lot to what you just said right there. If they don't fix the roads they already have, are they gonna build new roads? There's a lot to that, you know? The whole,
I mean, they need
we
to
can't
show
have
us
nice
that
things.
they hear us.
100%. That's one. That's two.
It looks like they're bringing the conversation over here for the exercises.
Yeah, we're getting into, so you could. There are, yeah. Today, commercial. So what do you do? So that's what
One of the things you'll see in the drafts, there's a section. It's 33A. It's like
you're required. What is that?
And basically what that's talking about is timing premature. So what it's trying to do is
bigger.
basically that's what's supposed to happen.
Most of that is not support any of the houses going in. Which means the workers, they should come to work. The people that own the business, at least for that. People really on it. So,
A lot of the time.
salaries.
That is something which
So.
I call it.
Planned-2, back to the forecast. It's not taken commercial aspects of a gas line. Small. Want to support a true